Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
All right, so the question of the day will be, is Bob Pauley going to comment today? Or is he just too busy with classes?
I think he comes in today. We're in our regular spot.
Okay.
I think that's helpful.
That's true. All right, for those who haven't joined us before, just let you know that we talk about lots of different topics in the news, things that are going on, and have a good give and take. And hopefully find this to be a riveting conversation throughout the next 50 plus minutes or so. And I guess we'll just go ahead and get right to it. We'll start off with President Biden addressing the UN General Assembly for the first time as the president, right? And so, what was the speech here? I mean, I don't know. I mean, President Trump addressed the UN General Assembly too, but Joe Biden at this stage with all these things going on, this was somewhat problematic for him in some ways too. Anyway, go.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. He had some problems with it, and he's like, we're not at war anymore. It's like, well, reminded of the old Trotsky line, right? You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. The people who are against us remain against us, and now you've added recently to the list of people who are against us. And right now you have France has recalled its ambassador, Israel has recalled its ambassador. You have a lot of diplomatic, minefield going on all around the world. We just made a treaty with what is now to build submarines, nuclear-powered submarines, for what right now is one of the most totalitarian countries on earth, Australia. I don't know if I believe that that's a good idea anymore, right? We considered them an ally because they shared our values and democratic traditions and so forth, but that's not the case. It's Australia equals People's Republic of China right now, if not worse. So I don't know why we would reward them with weapon systems when they definitely do not share our values or our foreign policy objectives.
Yeah, well, going to that, since that's another part of one of the things we were going to cover, but I just want to go back to the UN issue. As far as this whole AUKUS, AUKUS, agreement, from what little I did read, I mean, they had this contract for submarines with France. And everybody was fat and happy, I guess, about this. But Scott Morrison, I believe is his name. He's been concerned. He's made some pretty public pronouncements about China and the virus situation. All this, China has not. It doesn't matter what country you're from. China does not take kindly, and has not taken kindly to anybody bringing up or disparaging the country, trying to make any kind of ties whatsoever of COVID-19 to the Wuhan lab and anything like bad or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is over there. China wants to really separate themselves as much as possible from being the origins of COVID-19, at least publicly. And Australia was hit pretty hard. I mean, in terms of they've taken some pretty severe measures. Lots of lockdowns in Australia, really causing a lot of turmoil there. But I think they were, China's reaction, as we have discussed, on more than one occasion, has been that, they have become much more aggressive around the world. They've had the crackdown, in Hong Kong. They've made a lot of noise about Taiwan. We've talked about how the whole Afghanistan bungle sets up, China for a much better scenario for them, and just because it doesn't look like the U.S. is backing anybody up. So therefore China
even ourselves. There's also some boats, Chinese ships seen off the coast of the Aleutian Islands. That's the U.S.
Yeah. So I mean, we're seeing this. So, what I was reading was really that Australia was concerned about what China was doing or was going to do, and I think they were looking for maybe a stronger ally. Now, one of the differences in this contract, as I understand, is that the U.S. is going to provide nuclear-powered submarines, which the French were not. And
Right.
so that I think on that bet, the Australians figured out that that was a better solution for them. But France I mean, they're mad as a wet hen, and I don't really blame them necessarily for this. It's just that, they felt like they had the rug pulled out from under them. Now I will say that the Wall Street Journal, after this had happened, actually backed up this agreement, on their op-ed page, on the editorial section, said that they thought that this was actually the better move, for all parties involved based on the technology, everything like this. But you do bring up an interesting question, which is like, Australia and the U.S. I mean, the relations have not been as strong as they were when we were younger. So and the country has tilted left, and so what are we doing there?
Tilted totalitarian. I mean, you can't leave your house without their permission. They're talking about tracking you by your cell phone. If your cell phone leaves your house, you can be captured and jailed. I mean, it's as far from what we are as there is on Earth. I mean, not even the Chinese track everybody's cell phone movements.
Not as we know yet. but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that go on in China that we are not necessarily aware of. But Australia has imposed some severe measures on their citizens. There's no doubt about that, and it's not.
The government seems to be in the hands of some pretty unstable, unreliable figures right now, right? I mean, they're not. It's not, cooler heads are not prevailing in Australia. So, I mean, I'm wondering why Australia needs any weapon technology transfer from the United States or anyone right now.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Let me ask you this. This is just as we're discussing this in terms of leadership around the world, and countries like Australia and things like that, where the government has shifted sometimes back and forth a lot. Is it better to have one form of government, whether or not it's right, center, left, kind of a thing, governing for an extended period of time to give some stability in theory, or is this beneficial to have countries like Australia shifting to the right, maybe a little bit here, shifting to the left, going back and forth a little bit? To me, that seems to be a little more unstable. I don't know. I think as a kid, except for certain really third world countries or whatever, there had been some stability in a lot of these foreign countries. Not necessarily all good, but now we do see a lot of upheaval going out throughout Europe and other parts of the world. What in your opinion is really kind of the best for countries as a whole? It's hard to kind of say that as a blanket statement, but in general, I mean, how would you feel about Australia? Should they have something that's a little bit more longer term, a little more stable versus what's been going on? I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
I mean, within parameters, and that's what we are, right? I mean, we were very different country a year ago, right? We looked at the world differently. The world looked at us differently. People stayed in their boxes a little more than they are right now, for various reasons. I would credit Trump with some of them, and other people may have other reasons why that happened. But what has happened here is these are not within the normal parameters of this. What is happening is in Australia is dangerous, right? They've made themselves an unreliable ally. They've, the lockdowns and the suppression of freedom and free expression and thoughts counter to the government that they have undertaken there. I mean, that is every bit as bad and serious as anything China's doing with the Uyghurs or anything else. And they're doing it to their own people. They have police shooting at Australians in the streets, unarmed Australians. That's the other thing. I know that you've had a lot to do with gun people, right? Gun shows and so forth. Do not give up your guns, America, because what happens when you give up your guns is when the government turns on you like it has in Australia, you have no defense. You just have to do what they say. So, Australia is in a big hole, and it will be difficult to climb out. And I don't think that we should be considering them in terms, when we're figuring out who to share weapons technology with, we should not see them as an ally right now. We should see them with guarded caution and be resistant to joining any kind of deals with them.
I will say this is completely off the rails too, is that having been somebody who pokes around and streams a lot of different things, is that some of my favorite programs or more interesting programs are actually, they come out of Australia. And you're old enough to remember Xena, the warrior princess. It just that, right? So Lucy Lawless, I mean, she's from that part of the world. She's now in a new, I guess it's an Australian series all at this point, where she's kind of a police consultant, she's a former cop and everything like this. And I'm thinking, like, every time I watch this program, and I only can get it if I'm subscribing to BritBox, which I only do every once in a while anyway. And so I still have a hard time getting that Xena warrior princess thing out of my mind every time I see her. But it's going to be an interesting thing here. Now, I want to go back here. Bob has joined us now, and his comments here about Biden and the UN. And I think as you read this, I think he's right about this too. Is that the speech was from a delivery point. I mean, it was okay. I mean, it was Biden. He pretty much stayed on script. He didn't have to do off the cuff stuff, which is he's horrible at. He delivers his message. The thing is that this is this big grandiose message, which is kind of like the bottom line seems to be the world has a lot of problems, and the U.S. should spend all the money it can to help solve everybody's problem. Climate change, what was this thing I had? Oh, relentless diplomacy, right?
Right.
Reference to Afghanistan. I mean,
that's one of the things I was going to talk about is, the idea is really not to negotiate, right? The idea is to solve problems. And, he considers negotiation solving the problem, right? So, like, once we start negotiating, hey, the problem is dealt with, right? As well as it's going to be dealt with until we figure out more, right? And so, it's always this, we're all going to talk about this. So we basically what got determined, as far as Biden was concerned, his speech to the General Assembly was, we'll talk about it later, right? We're going to talk relentlessly, so what? Like, to say what? To do what? What is your objective? It's not just, let's have diplomatic meetings, right? This is not about calling meetings. This is about addressing the problems, right? And I didn't hear that from him.
Yeah, and this goes back to a lot of what we've talked about before under the Trump administration, is that President Trump was definitely unconventional when it came to a lot of things, but when it came to foreign relations and all this so-called diplomacy, he basically ripped up the playbook and said, I have a new playbook and it's going to be different, and he was trying to get to the point. Biden is now trying to restore the old world order as such. Right. The General Assembly types, they love this. That's what they want. They want, if the U.S. is going to throw money at them, that's even better. They'll love that even more. But Biden's not solving. And I kind of came away from this thing too, feeling like, so he felt that Afghanistan, he's still sticking by that as a success, right? I mean, glossing over the problems. I mean, that's critical.
It's over. He said it's over, right? It's not over. We still have 1,000 people or more trapped in there who want to get out. The media's moved on from that story, but those 1,000 people have not moved on, right? They haven't moved anywhere because they can't get out of Afghanistan. And the people trying to get them out now, it's not the government, it's private individuals, just Americans saving each other. And I'm sure that, in many cases, some money's changing hands, but hey, you're in a desperate situation. You're captive of a hostile government, You kind of got to take what you want. And I guess you saw the number 3 man in the government is the head of the Haqqani terrorist network. So, you turned this over to terrorists, Joe. You didn't succeed, right? You completely failed. You got a bunch of people killed, got a bunch of other people's lives destroyed. It looks like they've relocated about 70,000 Afghans out of the country. And it looks like maybe 3% of those helped us in any way and deserve that level of protection. I mean, it's just one bumbling mistake after another, and then lies and, dissembling and won't talk to the media, to cover it up.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing too, is that, how do you, and we've mentioned this, at least if not in more fuller detail, about kind of this. You stand for women. Your party is supposed to be the defender of women and women's rights, and what we're seeing happen here. It is breaking to me to read the stories as I do of what is happening to the women, in Afghanistan under the Taliban regime, particularly in the area of education. I think education is extremely important. It's one of the things that they have achieved over the last 20 years was that girls have been able to go to school. They've been able to be educated, co-educationally with boys in school. Women have gone to universities. They are learning and doing things. There are now, these heartbreaking stories of where the classes they're not necessarily they may be taking place, but the girls may be too afraid to go. It's a lot of uncertainty about exactly where the girls stand with this. People who were well along in their studies to become doctors and lawyers or whatever, they've been pretty much halted in their tracks at this point because the Taliban doesn't want any of that. They always say that we haven't banned the girls attending school, but they put up enough blocks and barriers to make you fear for your life to say, I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to risk my life and go.
Right, that's correct.
It's had the effect that they wanted to have anyway. They didn't have to go out right and say, we ban women. We've just put down enough policies or enough threats, around there to basically say,
they voluntarily walked away. What do you want us to do?
Right.
Yeah. So
which is terrible. I mean, it's absolutely terrible on this. And off on climate change.
At some point, they would think, okay, why are we living in this? Why are we living in caves? Why are we have basically the conveniences of all the conveniences of a modern 7th century home, right? And the West is not. Why are they so far ahead of us? Well, part of it is that we do take advantage of the intellectual capital of the women, right? We do let the women get educated and do research and practice law and so forth, right? And so we get all their experience and all their ability and all their imagination to work solving our problems. And they don't. They hide those people. It's like, who knows what contributions Afghan women might make to Afghan society were they allowed, right? So, you're doing something that has always kept you poor and continues to keep you poor.
Here's from put this up. Here's another one. Whoops. Try that again. Another one from Bob here. Allies could trust President Trump to do what he promised, even if they didn't like that course of action. Biden talks a good game, then throws policy curveballs into practice. The latter is far, far worse than for those allies. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely
and the reason
seeing things like that take place.
And the reason for that is, but Trump knew what he wanted, right? He knew, he had an idea how to balance all these interests, how to, make the NATO people spend what they were supposed to spend on defense, how to, clean up these refugee and border situations, how to deal with Afghanistan. He had objectives and he had a way to get there. The Middle East, the Abraham Accords, the leader of North Korea, so forth. There was a lot of them, right? But he had a plan. He pursued the plan. Biden is, we're going to negotiate. We'll negotiate. We'll talk to you at the negotiating table. We're going to negotiate relentlessly. It's like, okay, we don't really know what we want. We'll just go make a deal and whatever comes out of it, because we don't really have any principles that guide our thinking in this, right? It's just, be seen as this certain guy in the world, Big Daddy Warbucks or whatever. And, we'll just pay to solve the problems and you will love us, Well, the guy who pays to solve the problems, we appreciate the problems getting solved, but he's not loved and he's not respected because, we took him, we beat him, right? So, that's where Democrats always steer the country, and Biden is doing it on steroids. He's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, Biden wants to go back to this whole thing of where that you want to be loved by everybody, and you'll do whatever it takes to be loved by everybody, regardless of the policies, of
regardless of what it does to your people. That's that's the key detail, right? Is that it's your people who are hurt by this.
Yeah, I mean, and we've said this before. I mean, Biden doesn't have an America first policy. America is not number one in his mindset when he goes through with this, which is a huge difference from President Trump, who always tried to make sure that our interests were taken care of first, which is the way it really should be,
Right.
And now all this money also at climate change, this thing, which is really, it's not going anywhere domestically. I mean, they keep trying to throw up these bills that are they're struggling with, but they can't find their way out of this. I mean, obviously the UN General Assembly, they loved all this stuff because it also affirms that the U.S. has no intention of pulling out of the UN and trying to hold them accountable, which is what President Trump wanted. He wanted to hold the UN more accountable to things, and now we've got kind of a president who rolls over because we've known since pretty much day one that he doesn't have a good plan, doesn't really have the thoughts of his own. He listens to a lot of other people, and it's kind of like put the finger to the wind, see which way it blows, and that's the policy of the day or the moment of the week. But it's just crazy how this administration has been running the government here for what now, just over 8 months now.
Yeah, what a wreck. And as for the United Nations, Trump was not trying to get rid of them. He was trying to put them in their place and make them, understand what they could and could not be expected to demand of U.S. policy, right? And and he changed the orientation. He's like, we're here for, we're joining with you, and we'll work together on any joint cause. But like you say, we're going to put our people first in this stuff, and we expect you to do the same. And if everybody argues from that principle, I mean, that's an honest principle, right? And everyone understands, I'm here to, Mr. France is there to get the best deal for France. Mr. Australia is there to get the best deal for Australia. That's what they should do, right? So we could, but our president is there for giving France and Australia and whoever the best deal, which means you're just asking to be fleeced, right? It's this, the UN was not really creating a lot of trouble for Trump. And so he was not, hell bent on getting out of there because it really didn't matter. Now the UN is poised to create a lot of trouble for us because, we don't have a strong president. We have a weak, feeble, dishonest president.
Yeah, I mean, the members of the General Assembly know, right now, I mean, if they've been watching for the past, 8 months, that they've got a guy that they can push over and they can get deals that favor them over us. Once again, President Trump didn't make a huge deal at the UN except to just kind of lay down the framework of saying, here's the rules, here's the rules that, we're going to play by, kind of thing like that. And we're more than happy to, to be a part of this as long as you understand, America is going first, in anything that we talk about. And, like you said, I mean, look, every country should put their interests first.
Right.
But America should not they shouldn't just roll over to other countries and let them have their will. So it's it'll be one of those interesting things to watch down the line. Now, I want to move on here to this other huge, this issue that is just, really roiling the administration right now, which are, 15,000, 20,000 plus, and I heard there was a report, I think yesterday, that maybe another 20,000 Haitians are coming. But all these people coming in through this Del Rio, Texas, they have flooded in. They became a huge media event for which, the administration had no answers as to what to do with this. This has been a very bad look for the administration, and they have not handled it well. They haven't. They've totally. I think they botched this too. And where's Kamala? I thought she's in charge of immigration or something like that.
Right. She got nothing to do. Nowhere near the problem. They basically made a mess of the border. They incentivized all these, the other question is like, how do these people, if you look at a map, Haiti shares an island, the island of Hispaniola, with the Dominican Republic, right? It's 3-hour flight from Texas. So how are those people getting there? It's over an ocean. They're on an island. They don't have enough money for plane tickets. How did they all get there, right? And then I saw a thing today. A guy said that he thinks they were living comfortably in Brazil and Paraguay, and that may be true. but then it would not make sense for them to make this journey and sleep under a bridge in Texas, right? If you're living comfortably in Brazil, why would you put yourself through that? But something is, clearly we've gone from having the border as quiet as it has been in 25 years to, more than 2 million people have come across illegally this year. And you have this current stampede crisis at the border for which they have no answers. They're just driving the people around the country and dropping them off without even testing them for drugs. You notice that, I guess Peter Ducey, or isn't that his name, Fox News guy, yeah. He keeps trying to ask Psaki about this, and she doesn't have an answer. She doesn't give him an answer. She just says, we're working on it, basically. Circle back to you, and it moves on because they're not vetting them. They don't know who they are. They have this big class of people now doing it. Trump had an answer for that because he knew what he wanted the end game to look like. And Biden does not. He doesn't have a plan for any of this stuff. So he's just sort of playing it day by day. And, the world is eating us alive because, they're waiting for us to have an indecisive leadership and, clueless people trying to make decisions on their own. Like, General Milley, that's what they want. That's what they think is America at its most vulnerable. So now you have a major humanitarian catastrophe. And I guess Governor of Texas is on his way to the border today to order that the remaining places where it can be closed, right? They're just going to build fencing and try to patrol it themselves and try to do the federal government's job. We used to talk about this, 10 years ago. We were talking about, and when we first started doing this show, we talked about this once where like Utah has, these laws where they're real welcoming of immigrants and so forth. And, sort of for a red state sort of stands away from the others on this kind of issue. Right. And we talked about, states getting into immigration law, right? Because that's kind of a federal priority, right? Who can come and go in the country and so forth. But, you've increasingly politicized this to the point where states are, the only people protecting the interests of the people who live on the borders of those states are the governors of those states and the elected representatives of those states. So that's why you see, Governor Abbott involved, Senator Cruz involved, others, saying, hey, you got to protect these people. You got to close the border. You don't realize what all you're letting in and, what you're doing to their quality of life. So, I don't know. I mean, those people, they want to talk about flipping Texas blue. They're not flipping Texas blue. Texas is furious with them right now with the way that they've been mistreated.
Yeah. So as you can see here, what Bob has chimed in on, this kind of jives with what I've been reading so far about the Haitians that they've gone to. They have settled in places like Chile and things like that. And this was a lot of this has been, economic migration because, as you pointed out, the geography makes absolutely no sense for them to get here. I mean, it just, so this is happening. Now, part of this has just been, also because the Biden administration's lack of cohesive policy or any policy whatsoever on the border leads people to believe that America is basically open, going to welcome them. And if these people want to improve their economic situation, they can come to the U.S. and we'll take them in. And so we've, then we've had this other problem with this is that, Biden administration is like, okay, so we got, they had 10 or 15,000 that first day or two. And then they started deciding, well, we'll put them on planes and we'll take them back to Haiti. And then there were reports about how these people were, they were now the pilots and the agents were being attacked by these people, by the people being deported and everything like this. And then they had the dynamic of of the Haitian government saying, they've agreed to take them back, but they said it's really not because we've just had the assassination, of the prime minister, all this kind of stuff. And they were kind of like, but I'm like, well, look, it's like, well, I kind of wonder, what would have happened had they said, we're sorry that you of our people, but we can't take them back. We're not, you don't come, don't even show up here. At least they're willing to take them, but it's not solving the situation. Democrats got mad because they didn't like the way the policies, particularly the far left, that didn't fit with the policy of, the deportations never sit well with the left. And so, so they've amped up the allowance, I guess, to allow more people in. But, yeah, they're not really being tested. They're not being vetted. We don't know. A lot of people are now saying, okay, now it's a report they're being released in tests, but they'll have to come back in like 60 days or whatever. This is the same policy that has been failing with the other immigrants, right? The other legal.
That's what it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's kind of like, we don't know where these people, how many do you think are actually going to come back and show up in court or whatever? To me, I'm just not going to happen.
That's right. They're not, and they don't, they're not going to show back up. I mean, you've recreated all the problems that Trump had addressed, because again, Trump had an approach to the border. It's like, we can negotiate visa levels. We can negotiate legal immigration. He was even willing to make a deal on the Dreamers, right? If you think about the Dreamers, that's why Ann Coulter abandoned Trump, right? She was totally against that ever happening, and Trump was like, sure, if we get control of the border, then we can talk about letting in people legally that we can vet and kind of have an idea of who we're getting, so we're not kicking them out of the country 2 years later after they've killed somebody, right? He had a plan. He had a thing. And this is just be nice to everybody, and we'll jawbone, and we'll have more negotiations. We'll negotiate relentlessly. So
right, and you see John has chimed in here too, and I think I think you're right. I mean, it does want to make your head explode the way this is all gone. The lack of and just letting these people in.
It's a national security nightmare. We have no idea. Like, whole droves of terrorists could be streaming over the border. We have no way of knowing, because we're not checking them at all.
Right, and I think as conservatives, I mean, we can be compassionate. We are, we want to be good on the humanitarian side of things, but you have to balance that with national security issues and other health safety issue. COVID, you just can't take these chances. I mean, it's like, I'm not getting any younger, and I do try to be at least relatively safe. I don't like to go to into large crowds where I'm not really sure who the people, in an unmasked situation. I've got a trip coming up in a few weeks, to go see my grandchildren, but that road trip means I've got to go through West Virginia and Kentucky, and we will have to make some pit stops along the way. But, chances are, we're not big on stopping for like extended lunches or meals or things like this. It'll be mostly, gas station fill up or whatever, and another pit stop. But, so our interaction with people in those areas are going to be limited, because like West Virginia, what's their vaccination rate? Like 46% or something like that. Yeah. But, I just don't feel comfortable in a situation like that. But it doesn't seem the administration really cares about all these people. We don't know squat about them, and just, we don't know what to do with them. So we'll send some people back to Haiti. We'll let the other ones go into the US, and everything is going to be bright and cheery and just fine. Only the left believes this, I guess, or something. There's just other crazy people. Yeah, my head. In 8 months, I mean, I don't know how many times my head's been ready to explode with this administration. It is just,
they're unbelievably inept, just bad.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. You mentioned, and you may have been referencing this thing. So Biden sat down with Boris Johnson. They were having this conversation, and I love Boris Johnson for the fact that he goes out and he says, we have some time. Let's take some questions, right? And so he gets some questions from the British press, and then the Biden people are like, they're creating all kinds of, roadblocks and things like this, so that our reporters can't ask any questions of Biden, and then everything just kind of like ends apparently.
And he kind of waves them away with his hand, right? And, I mean, that was a bad looking thing. I guess the reporters have filed a complaint now. The White House Correspondents Association has filed a complaint.
Yeah, that's why I hear you. They filed a complaint.
You got to, when the other leader takes questions, you got to take questions, right? Trump, right. That's another thing. It's like, you say what you want about Trump, but he answered every one of those questions, right? He let people ask all the questions they wanted, hostile as those questions could possibly be, right? He didn't care. He took them all on. This guy won't even take on the friendlies, right? Who are becoming a little less friendly. I don't know if you noticed, but you talked about, there's one on here about Chuck Todd said he has a a crisis of credibility on domestic and foreign policy, that he does not deliver on what he says, and people are taking their measure of him and realizing that he's not a reliable partner in negotiations because he's not honest.
Right. I mean, I've just written a piece for the next AIM report about the media and I mean, they're starting to diverge. I mean, we're just seeing that as much as the media was in that, in his corner, they're supporting that, they pushed it, did as much as they could to push this candidacy forward. Now that even a lot of them are realizing, like, we've got a problem here. We've got a president who's just not competent.
Yeah,
and
if we're going to, doesn't know what he's doing, things keep blowing up. Things keep turning out to be not at all what the administration described them as being. Remember, the day after Afghanistan, the day after we turned over the country and our trillions of dollars of military equipment to a terrorist-led government, right? We got them back and we droned the planners of the Kabul airport attack. No, it wasn't planners. It was aid workers, 7 children, right? Didn't really know who we were shooting at because we're not our over the horizon intelligence, who we were told was so reliable, was completely unreliable. So, just mistake after mistake, and they just can't shoot straight because they don't really know what they want and they're not really qualified for the jobs they have.
Right. And I think the media, because Biden, I mean, this was their wanted. They wanted a Democrat in there. They wanted Trump out at all costs. They get Biden as a president, and the media, like they have done for other Democrats, they're willing to do the bidding of the Democrat president. But but when the president stops taking their questions, even if the questions are going to be uncomfortable, that starts to that's when they start really get, I think, chapped about the whole thing, because they're like, look, we've criticized Republican presidents who may not have answered all of our questions or done things or whatever, but we really fully expect. I mean, and they complained under the Obama administration too, when Obama didn't have press conferences and things like that. They weren't happy with Obama for a period of time for that as well. But I think just this enormous amount of things that have happened in 8 months. Of the Biden administration, I think it's even hard for liberal left journalists to stomach this. And how can you cover this up? It's like,
yeah, I mean, they keep trying. You see them, one of the ones that came home to roost here in the last day or so is, Politico went and re-reported the New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop, and guess what? All those people that they said, he's supposedly received those emails, right? That was no Russian disinformation. That was a completely accurate story that they all poo-pooed. And why did they poo-poo it? Because it was 8 days before the election, and it would have hurt Biden running against Trump. Like after the election, 9% of the people who voted for Biden said they would have voted for Trump if they'd have known about those accusations first. And we still don't know the half of that. We're still not. The American public is not aware of the habit. It's like, incest is described in there both by Hunter Biden and by Joe Biden. Joe Biden's daughter said in her memoirs that, some weird stuff happened in the shower with dad, so, I mean, these are not good moral people. They do not have a direction. And you can say, oh, Trump's been married 3 times and this, that, and the other, but he knows right from wrong, and he knew what he wanted. And what you have now is just weak need, it's like you're trying to arrange who you kowtow, appeal to, whatever, right? And get those lined up to where it hits all the right groups and makes everybody smile, rather than, what will help the American people, and it's getting out of control. It's getting to be a huge problem.
Yeah, once again, I mean, we're, as we say, it's just, it seems like every month we count down. It's like, okay, so 8 months, we've still got a long way to go, but it just makes you wonder how much longer this can go on in all of this. I mean, 40 more months of this, theoretically, this just, after 8 months of this, yikes, we're already having a big problem. I just can't fathom, another 3.5 years or under 3.5 years left here. It has been one of the worst starts of a presidency I can ever recall seeing for this.
Yeah, the other thing is, like, if we look ahead to 2022 and 2024, there's one candidate in the country right now who's saying, vote for me because, I'm Biden's boy. And that's Terry McAuliffe, right? And running for governor of Virginia. And, his thing is, Biden likes me. He endorsed me. Trump supports my opponent, right? So, they're polling, and I read this thing this morning that it was an analysis of the recall election in California, and they were saying, well, what turned the tide was when the governor Newsom started talking about Larry Elder was another Trump. And as soon as you got the name Trump going around, it's like, it's not about anything good Newsom did. It's like, we can't have Trump being in power here in any way. And, that's basically Terry McAuliffe's theory of the Virginia election. And at some point, that's going to lose its power, right? At some point, people can say, well, Biden, you're the guy backing you is not all that hot either. And, maybe we shouldn't decide on which president is for who. And, we should decide on other factors. And, it may happen in Virginia. It probably won't happen in New Jersey. But it's going to happen somewhere, and it's going to happen pretty soon. And the Democrats then don't have another argument because, the rest of their argument is pretty mired in incompetence and failure right now.
Yeah, on Virginia, which is where you live, the polling that I've seen, is razor thin. It's basically a dead heat.
Well, it's
more
2 or 3 points. It's not quite a dead.
Yeah, but 2 or 3 points. That's really marked. It can swing very easily one way or the other, but it doesn't. It's not the dominant Democrat kind of a thing that I think a lot of people were expecting. Definitely not what Terry McAuliffe was expecting when he entered the race. I think he expected to kind of glide right in and just succeed Northam and have a second administration here, a rebirth of what he had done before. But years have gone on, times have changed. And I have said this, and we've said this many times on this program about the whole McAuliffe-Youngkin thing. Tying Youngkin to Trump is just not, to me, a winning strategy. That's not the way you do things. It's, separate yourself on policy and what you're going to do and things like this. But, he hasn't been able to do it. And, the desperate emails continue to roll out from the McAuliffe campaign. The analysis of the California recall election, if you're trying to, any analysis that really says that, tying Larry Elder to Trump was one of the main reasons for this, I think is just not really true. There's so many different factors. It's a recall election, so there's limited things people could do anyway. They said, do you want to recall Newsom? If so, who you want to replace him with? So, everybody in the state had been mailed a ballot. Okay, so that means now even your fringy voters, even people who may not have come out to the polls that are Democrats, probably had a chance to vote without having to go to a poll. Definitely a strategy of the Democrats and Newsom to make sure that they tried to gather as many votes as they could in an election that probably wasn't going to interest a majority of the population from the get-go there. Elder, nice guy, pretty good conservative. Time to Trump probably doesn't help. But I think, in a state where the registration is so lopsided, there wasn't, this is not Ray Davis, type of a thing like that. 1 year with just a little over a year before the next election for the governor. I think these are all factors. Are you going to replace a guy for a year? And then he'll run again in 2022 anyway, and things like that. I just think there's so many factors in here. The Democrats they put a lot of emphasis. I think, oh yeah, this is great. We have a blueprint for 2022, and I'm like, no, you don't. You cannot take what happened in California with this recall election, with all the vagaries of that election, and say, that's how we're going to retain our House majority in 2022. That's how we're going to take over, increase our run in the Senate. They're really grasping at straws, in my opinion, on this.
Yeah. I think good luck with that. I think people are going to want answers on why, gasoline is $1.50 higher a gallon, and grocery prices are through the roof, and housing prices are off the map, and we're at loggerheads with all our allies, and we're backing a totalitarian regime in Australia. We're working with a totalitarian regime in China. Our borders being overrun. I don't think talking about Trump is going to get you very far. I really don't by that time.
Yeah, and I mean, as John chimed in here, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's it. I mean, not that I need Trump to return, but they just see the policies and the incompetence of this administration. And yeah, look, I mean, we still have supply chain issues. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. The administration hasn't figured out how to really untangle all of this and get things going back there. The Fed and the administration keeps talking about transitory inflation, and it's cooling down slightly. Not that much. It's still pretty darn high month to month. I mean, it's going lower.
Levels too. It's got a long way to come down.
Yeah, no, I mean, and my wife had things. She meat prices and things like that, and we saw what happened during the pandemic, and now we kind of expected things, but because of supply chain issues and other factors that are involved, there's things that are just they're staying stubbornly high. Gas prices are staying stubbornly high. There isn't anything in sight that says we're going to solve this problem. I will admit that I was getting extremely cheap milk at the Walmart in town for a long period of time. It was $1.49 a gallon, at the Germantown Walmart. I think it was even 20 cents cheaper if you went to Frederick. But I'm driving 30 miles to save 20 cents a gallon on milk was really the economic calculus.
Maybe not, right?
Yeah, but the last time my wife
went to go to Frederick for some reason. I mean, they do have Sonic. And
right. Yeah, honey, I got cheaper gas. The milk was 20 cents cheaper, right? but I used 3 gallons of gas, whatever. But when the last time she went to that particular Walmart a few weeks ago, the price had gone to $2.09, right? So then I had noticed in my local Aldi, I was actually surprised they had actually matched that price, and it was a heck of a lot closer. But when I went to Aldi because I needed milk, the milk was no longer $1.49. The cheapest milk they had was $2.33, and this was I'd only been at that Aldi like a week before. So all of a sudden, something happened here with their milk supply, and we now saw a more than 50% increase in like a week in the price of milk.
Yeah.
In that store, and I'm like, okay, I realize that if you go to Giant Food or Safeway or something like that, you're paying a heck of a lot more for milk than if you're at Costco, Sam's, and these other places. But it's a little bit of a sticker shock, even to pay that kind of price when it was. And you just see this stuff where all these things are creeping up. The shrinkage. You go buy a box of cereal, the cereal box, you may pay the same amount you paid for cereal before, but you're getting like 5% less cereal, by weight or something in there. So all these things are happening. It's like, hello, why does this remind me of when I was a teenager under Jimmy Carter?
Yeah, there's a lot of Jimmy Carter.
This is what I'm.
Just the ineptitude, right? The lack of clear vision of what you wanted. The sort of hackocracy that sort of attains to these people, right? I mean, who was around Jimmy Carter? It ended up being, hacks like Burt Lance, right? And Cy Vance that we had to suffer through for 4 years. People hopelessly, utterly in over their heads, making huge policy decisions at a critical moment in U.S. history just because, they were the only people the guy from Georgia knew, right? And, Biden, small state senator, right? He's had a comfortable little racket. He sold some votes. He had some deals with China and Ukraine and whoever. He focused on foreign policy because, you could then get foreign aid circulated back to you and so forth. And, a small state senator pulling his, fairly routine graft, didn't really light the meter, right? But then you make that guy president and, the possibilities for graft go way up, and the pressure on you to get it right goes way up. He never had the people, and he does it now. It's like we talk about, Trump made some bad personnel decisions. I mean, look at these yo-yos, right? Blinken, Mayorkas, Milley, as Joint Chiefs. I guess he was in the Trump thing too. But I mean, these people have utterly failed us. The national security guy, Sullivan. How do these guys have jobs today? You're like, well, we didn't know Afghanistan. We didn't know that army was good. It's like, elementary things you're not getting, and yet they keep their jobs and they keep rolling right along, right? And he doesn't even see any problem with it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's right. I mean, because we've talked about Blinken and Sullivan, these guys, Milley, about the whole Afghanistan bungle and how they maintain their jobs. But as you brought up Mayorkas. I mean, his name came up initially too when we had the initial surge after Biden took office. And then, once again, people are asking, he's like, so what's the situation? What's the solution? He doesn't have an answer. Okay. So, there's gross incompetency in this administration with their people on doing things, and when I think about inflation, I think back, I mean, when I mentioned Carter, I mean, that's 1976 to 1980. There are people that we know, my own kids, for example, your kids, they weren't around when that happened. They didn't experience I thought, hey, look, as a 17, 18-year-old kid at first, my first reaction was like, heck, I had a money market fund with Fidelity that was paying me 15% interest. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. The problem was that interest rates and everything else were like 17 to 20%. So I was, my buying power was being eroded at 15% interest rate that I was being paid. It's insane. So, this generation is used to, next to nothing interest rates, but they're also used to very low inflation. So, has inflation been eating away at us a little bit? Yeah, it has been. But we don't see
8% year over year. Haven't been eating away at us like that. That's chunks, man.
Yeah,
that's junk yardage, as they say in football. That's a big play.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if you go into Central America or in places like that, South America, you see countries where inflation is running 50, 60, 70, 100%, right? We don't experience that. We haven't experienced anything like that.
Years and years under administrations of both parties.
But I mean, if an administration is incompetent enough, you could see these things, right? You could see these coming. All right, anyway. Enough of that. Within 2 minutes, go for it.
Well, you sort of finished that thought. So we're now in a situation where, the debt ceiling has to be dealt with by October. Either we reduce spending somewhere, or we raise the debt ceiling. And right now, I guess the minority leader McConnell has made clear to the administration, as well as the two Fed directors, Treasury directors who visited him yesterday, that they're dead serious. You're not going to do it with Republican votes. And I don't think you have Sinema's vote, and I don't think you have Manchin's vote, which means they have no way to lift the debt ceiling. They have no way to pass their $3.5 trillion spending package, which means they have no way to pass their $1.1 trillion human investment package, or whatever it is. So all their legislative program is stuck. And I guess he said that 3.5 trillion when Manchin has said, let's put it off till 2022. That probably makes some sense for him, although they will hate it. But, he's trying to save them from an electoral wipeout, right? Because if you go passing that stuff, I mean, they're never going to recover. Some of the polling now already has Biden in the mid to high 30s, right? Trump was never that low in the polls, right? So you've lost trust on both sides, right? Of their side and our side. And, the debt, as you have here, the debt ceiling clock is ticking. The other thing that's about to come due is going to be a big problem for Trump, Biden. I don't think October is going to be a very good month for him. Is that these COVID mandates, right? These employers making all these employers mandate all their employees get jabbed. A lot of those employers are saying you have to have it done by X day in October, right? Or at least be started or whatever. So the people who really do intend to, resist the vax and walk off their jobs, you're going to have a big, massive bunch of that going on. And it's not a small number of people. And most critically, it's a lot of people in the medical profession who are looking at this, and they're looking at these patients after they take these shots, and they're like, heck no, I ain't doing that. So, he's got a tough month and a half ahead. And it's probably his presidency is riding on it.
Yeah, I mean, the Congress will figure something out in terms of maybe suspending the ceiling or something like that, I think, and then because no one wants a default. But I think Manchin's right about postponing it. I don't know that Nancy Pelosi understands that putting that package off till after the 2022 is actually to their benefit, not to their detriment. Because
right.
If they tried to push this forward, this is a bad deal for them. I mean, this absolutely kill them in 2022 election. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We will see you again next week.